Awesome. Hi there, everyone. Mychal A. Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and I'm super excited to be here finally after some technical difficulties with Master Astrologer Judith Hill. Everyone, I'm so happy that you all stuck around. We had a little bit of a technical snafu earlier, and we were trying to get things sorted out in the background, and we finally figured something out thanks to our wonderful broadcast producer, Joe. So thank you so much, Joe, for getting us situated. And Judith, welcome to the Oraculos Podcast.
Oh, welcome to you, Mychal. I'm so happy to be here, and it's a real thrill to be in the halls of Oraculos.
Awesome. All right. So for those of you who don't know, Judith has an upcoming talk that is going to be this July 6th, and it's going to be on remediating Uranus. And Judith is going to be talking to us all about what to do when Uranus is impacting our natal chart directly. And there's a lot more stuff that she's going to cover in that talk and in that lecture. But before we dive into that, I think it would be good for us just to talk to you for a bit, Judith, to find out who you are and how you came into astrology in the first place.
This is a question I get asked frequently, and the answer is quite interesting. My father sat me on his knee when I was a wee thing. I was only 3, and he showed me some charts. And he began teaching me from the age of 3 a little bit. And then at the age of 10, he took me on as a pretty much of an apprentice and taught me everything he could for 4 years. And then at the age of 14, I opened my practice. And I gave my first paid reading at 14, and it was a great success. I think it was to my high school teacher's girlfriend or something. And then I was on my own by 17 and had to support myself. And I, continued doing readings pretty much full time from the age of 21, but all the way up from age 14, and just ran an astrology office for many, many decades, doing every possible kind of chart, specializing in the technical and practical fields, vocational, electional. I even had a little business called The Right Time, where I would, I made a little clock. I made a little logo with the clock with, planets going around it. I put it in the newspaper. Nobody called. And then one day, somebody called. They wanted me to give them a date for something. And then it just started to, grow. And then I spent 10 years in the study of astrological statistics when I was with the NCGR. And we did a lot. And anyway, I could go on and on and on. I don't want to go on too much.
Awesome. And Judith, I know that you were, for those of you who don't know, the NCGR is the National Council for Geocosmic Research. And I know that you were affiliated with was it the San Francisco chapter?
Yes, I was the educational director of that chapter for 1 year. At the same time, I was very close to that time. I was working with the physicist Arthur Young as his private astrological assistant, which was, just a fabulous experience.
So what was that connection like, working with physicist, and what was the purpose of being his astrological assistant?
Arthur Young was the physicist that solved the problems of helicopter flight. And he has a book called The Bell Notes, because he invented the Bell helicopter and his astrological insights. He was an astrologer, and he felt that nothing could possibly happen without an exact solar direction hit. Had to be exact. So he wanted me to find out if this was true. And so I would work on these projects. We had Lillian Gish, and I would do her whole life for him. And he also let me lecture and teach at his Institute for the Study of Consciousness in Berkeley. And all these, total maverick scientists would show up. But anyway, I found that his theory wasn't true, that things would not always happen on an exact solar arc, but usually within 3 to 6 months, sometimes a year. He was very disappointed with this result. I remember us talking. But yeah, he was an amazing man.
Awesome. And Judith, I know that from there, you said that you were dealing primarily with vocational astrology as well as electional astrology. And in general, over your years of practice, what is something that you've noticed has really become the movement of the astrological community? So, for example, in the 17th century, horary was it, and before that, it might have been mundane astrology. Have you noticed a particular direction in terms of astrological interest over the years?
Oh my goodness, yes, Michael. I've been having a field day with your page 200 of your book. You're reading it to all my friends, but laughing our heads off. I love that book. Michael was born to save astrology, folks. Well, in my day, since the time of Alan Leo, astrology lurched out of the practical, out of vocational, electional, medical, into almost purely psychological, spiritual, mythological. And the force behind this was Alan Leo. At that time, astrologers were being arrested because of the vagrancy laws. This was the exact time that Freud and Jung had come in with their seminal works, and psychology was new and very exciting. And Leo told all of his, he was the big astrologer in the world. In those days, you'd have one, maybe two, and one book every year. We'd all run down and get it. But this is 1900, 1911. 1920 area. Anyway, he gets arrested twice for being an astrologer, got put in prison once. So he told everybody, let's just do psychological readings. We'll stop being arrested. And that worked. But it started a real interest in that direction. And the practical arts were not completely abandoned. There's always the one person who did it, like me, but no one else was doing it. I was the only person in town doing vocational, electional, horary. And I really wanted astrology to be useful to this kind of client. And so I decided I would really learn these old arts. But until just recently, Michael, that's where astrology has stayed. And all of a sudden, in the last 4 or 5 years, is it? We see a huge interest in what I do mostly now, the medical astrology, a huge interest in horary, fertility astrology. I teach surgery dates, for instance. This interest is coming back. People are longing for the foundational concrete astrology now.
I think that's such an interesting observation because what oftentimes happens is that when something or when a tradition goes too far in one direction, we find that there's this deep yearning and hunger for the opposite side of that. And one of the things that I always tell my students is that there's a whole lot of the other type of astrology that exists within the world. And the more that that exists, the more that people will genuinely have this deep hunger for more concrete expressions of astrological practice. And so those of us who practice astrology in that way, we are kind of like a rare breed, as it were, because people are going to come and seek us out when they want to deepen their experience of what astrology is. And even with Alan Leo, I mean, the psychological astrology movement, it did a lot to keep astrology alive. But at this point, we're beyond needing to just stay alive. We're now having a robust field, and we need to get back to some of these more concrete applications of astrology that you've mastered over your very long practice.
Yes, and I have to say, rereading your book this week, really getting into it, it's sharpening me up. We need to know, you're so precise. We need to have that as a basis. And I absolutely agree. The psychological astrology is very needful and useful. I think people have shied away from the technical astrology, partly because they think it's very hard. Well, you do have to learn precision and you have to learn precise thinking. But actually, in essence, it's easier than psychological astrology because it has a mechanical quality to it. You don't need to be a psychic genius or gifted in mythological thinking, you need to know your astrology.
Exactly.
And once you do, it's right there.
So, question for you, Judith, as somebody who has practiced for decades, and I want you, well, if you're comfortable, how long have you been in astrological practice?
5.5 decades.
There we go.
Actually, probably more than that. It's not ladylike. Give away. We avoid this. Most people brag about how many years they've been. At a certain age, you don't brag anymore. It's like, okay, we just did it a long time. Lifetime astrologer.
Awesome. So Judith, as somebody who has practiced astrology and taught astrology for all of these decades, what do you think are the things that an astrologer needs to know in terms of what is the basis that constitutes a robust astrological education?
This is a really good question. I actually wrote a blog on it a few years back. What do you need to be a good astrologer? What do you need to be a great astrologer? Well, in my feeling, one should have both halves of one's brain active. Like one of the greatest scientists of all time was George Washington Carver. And he came up with 80 products out of the peanut and 200 out of the sweet potato. And he said he never used a book in his office because the plants would tell him what to do. Well, we do need to have, astrologers need to be good at things like music and poetry, yes. But it also helps a good astrologer to be good at mechanics, good at cooking, good at understanding legal type of thinking or debate or law to sharpen their intellect. My teacher had me watch Judge Judy for a year and a half every day to gain the sharpness of mind she had, and also to learn to understand more what humans are about. It was the best education I ever had. So that's just number one. But what does the astrologer need? First of all, they need a very good foundation, such as you give in your Renaissance book. They have to really understand these rules. They may not use all the rules, but they should know them. Like, when you're learning to drive, it's so hard. And you're running into the garage and everything. And then one day you're just driving along, not even thinking about it. It's automatic. Like for you and me, Michael, it's now automatic. So you need a good foundation. Then you need to know how to strategize. You need to know how to ask a question or understand, get the client to ask a clear question so that you can give a clear answer. You need to learn what is behind that question. They say, can I take a trip to Florida? That may be not what they're asking. They may be asking, can they go and cheat on their husband down there? Or how's their health? Will be good for them. So you need to know how to think clearly. So even, my lead apprentice is a lawyer. He can think very clearly. He's one of the best astrologers I've ever seen in practice. So learning to think clearly, that's why being very precise with language and knowing all the rules really helps. You do need to be intuitive. You need to have a clear screen, very clear screen, not a mind that's all jumbled up. Now, to specialize, I feel astrologers do very well to specialize. Are you going to, what is going to be your thing? Your thing. Do you want to specialize in helping people understand relationships or understand themselves, be a good natal reader? I did natal readings for decades. Do you want to be good at, forecasting? Do you want to just be an entertainer? There a lot of astrologers are just entertainers. They go to parties and whatever they do. That we do need to stand up for ourselves. Down at the library, they have 2 huge compendiums of vocations you can choose. And in both of them, you look up astrologer and it's under entertainment. This is what the public thinks. Okay, plenty of room for them. Okay, do you want to help people with their careers? I always look at a chart, I'm looking at a chart, and the first thing I see is what is this life good for? Always what I see. I don't see psychology. I see what's the life good for. Do you want to be an electional astrologer? Do you want to be a astrocartographer, a financial astrologer, like Robert Weinstein? What do you do naturally? What do you see when you look at a chart? Don't think you need to know it all. Now, I did do it all. It was just my nature, but most people are good for something. So find that. Then get experience. Don't think you're an astrologer in 1 year. After about 5 years of practice, you'll be cutting your teeth. 10 years of practice, I'd say you can get your brown belt. And I could keep going, but I don't want to hog the floor here.
No. I mean, I think that the points that you covered are completely wonderful and valid, because I don't really think that today, with the sort of certification culture that we have in the world at large, people have this broader perspective of all the things they need to do and all the things they need to study in order to really be great astrologers. So I think it's wonderful hearing your perspective in terms of just the scope of an astrologer's practice. Particularly when you mentioned the piece of astrologers being diversified in other fields. In the Renaissance period, for example, if you were a part of an artistic guild, they also wanted to know that you were in your local choir, or that you were also a farmer, or that you had something else that was able to ground your artistic pursuits in other pursuits as well, because from the Renaissance perspective, too much art would make you go crazy, or too much of doing any one thing would make you go crazy. So this sense that the astrologer should also be skillful in other areas that have nothing to do with astrology specifically, but that just have to do with our humanity, I think that that's a powerful insight that more and more people need to know, because so many of us study astrology and we only know astrology, and we don't really know how to help people financially, but yet we want to give a financial reading, and we don't know how to help them. We want to help them medically, but we know nothing about the human body. And we want to help them with astrocartography, but we know nothing about the world or the map. So I think it's a wonderful thing for people to know that being an astrologer is the primary part of what we do as astrologers, but we should also have a fundamental life knowledge as well that we can bring to our astrological practice.
That is so important. Wonderful insight. I've always observed that if a person has their head in the stars too much, they can go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Star knowledge is very intense stuff. So when I was taking personal apprentices, I would always insist that they had something very physical. They might have been a farmer. They might be a mechanic. Those two things I like quite a bit, because they help you understand, they help with the physical side of life. And you're right, Michael, you bring up a point. Do we have any right consulting people on things we do not know anything about? Like, people would want me to do financial readings, and I'd say, you better go talking to a turtle at the zoo, one of those big tortoises. They come up and they want some lettuce. Just go talk to them. They'll know more about finances than me. But curiously, I always had a gift for picking the day the stocks would go way up or way down. Even Robert Weinstein said, "Yeah, you're really good at that," because I just give them some tips. But I will not help people with their finances. I will tell them a time when it looks like they could be lucky. I used to do a lot of experiments with things. Astrologers should experiment. But primarily, I feel astrologers, one more thing, they should like people. If you don't like people, you aren't interested in people, you should be, at least, if you don't like, you can not like them, but be interested in them. If you're fascinated with people, fascinated with charts, then you're an astrologer. If you're in the field just because you can make money, you're not going to be very good, because the universe will give you information if you have interest and love, or concern. I would say love is too big, concern for your fellow beings. And then you will get information to help them.
Now, speaking about that piece of the universe giving us information, I know that forecasting has been something that has been a cornerstone of your practice for a very long time. What do you think is the role of prediction in astrology today, especially in a world where there's such a strong psychological trend in our astrological community, where people probably don't even want to predict anything because that just feels too fatalistic? What do you think is the role of prediction within our astrological practice today?
Well, first of all, I never predict. I give A plus B equals C. In other words, if you're drinking and carrying on and driving your car too fast, there's this little aspect down the road where you could crash your car or you could end up in prison. And I'm going to tell you when that is, but it's up to you. I don't know what's going to happen. I can discuss the weather. I can tell the person what kind of weather will be operating where and for how long. I cannot make a prediction. I might get a psychic, insight coming in. But we have to be very careful making predictions for people because they influence people psychologically. We have to remember that just like how people view doctors, or a lot of people treat their astrologer's words as if it's sent from God, when you're just a person. So you are responsible if you say something like, "Oh, look, you're going to die in 1 year," or "Oh," or if you look at, a lot of people look at the chart and they go, "Oh," or they make a face, or they go, "Hmm." And the client's just terrified. They don't know what that is. So you have to control your face, and learn. Now, I teach my students, if you do see something, how do you say it? How do you say it? What if you see in the chart that they might have cancer and you strongly feel this? You don't say, "Oh my God, oh," you say, "It's time for a checkup," or "This is a wonderful year to work on self physical, cleansing, transformation, getting your health together." You be very careful with what you say. Astrologers are not getting trained in this skill because you have power over the subconscious when you have a client. So, but you asked a bigger question, Michael, which is, what place does prediction have in the world today? Good astrologers can see when storms are coming, or maybe who'll win a political race, or um, this is only useful if it's useful. Like if I used to work for years, we did earthquake prediction statistics, and yes, we predicted earthquakes pretty exactly. First try. I remember we got the Loma Linda, and we had it into all the hotlines, and it happened. And I moved out because I knew it was coming and I knew where. Now I stopped doing that, so please don't write me about that. But um, that doesn't mean you're going to be right. So you don't necessarily frighten everybody and upset the whole real estate market. Uh, you can work with your family, your friends. If you see that a huge thing is going to hit humanity, there's not much you can do. You can work with prayer groups, so you have to think about the implication of what you're doing. And is it useful for people? It might be useful for this particular person to know they need to get out of town now, or this particular person to know they should get out of this. I saved this woman $100,000 or something. I told her when the big stock drop was coming, and she got out 2 weeks in advance. And she even appeared she was a big stockbroker. She even appeared on a magazine telling her an astrologer tipped her off. But, can you help the whole world? Not likely. So when people ask me to give predictions, and they do often, I will not do it. I do have a medical astrology forecast. Now, the medical astrology forecast, which you can subscribe to, that is very helpful for learning how medical transits work. So, this is here. This is if you have hypertension, you got to watch this period. So that is not forecasting. That's talking about the weather. It's not saying what will happen. You can give your client a good weather report. But it's up to them to pull out an umbrella, or if it's going to pour and pour, maybe they can build a fish farm. What can you do with the weather? That's important.
Now, speaking of what we can do with the astrological weather, I know that remediation is something that's been very central to your practice as well. And we tend to hear about remediation more so in Jyotish today than we do in many Western astrological circles. Can you tell us what remediation is, please?
Wonderful, Michael. Oh, you asked such good questions. I didn't know what Michael was going to ask. I was getting ready to play tennis. What was he going to throw at me? What's he going to throw at me? And so this is a really, really good one. Remediation, the planets do exert actual rays according to, and they're in light rays. There's other ways that they work. We don't have time to go into that. But there are many ways to help remediate if you're getting an adverse radio signal that's going to upset your body. Remember, in the medieval and Renaissance times, there were like 13 etiologies or ways you would get sick. But one was called ens astral, the astrological. The astrology could make you sick, and it can. You can watch this. So, or a transit of Uranus, which we'll be talking about on July 6th, can actually cause a lot of mayhem. So what can you do about it? And yes, the Jyotish of India have a remarkable system of chants, gems. I teach a lot of the gem remedials. I probably was the first to teach that in the US. I don't know. They have methods to adjust. So in remedial, there's different kinds of remedials. And I want to say before I do this that the talk on July 6th, I'm going to introduce 30 or more types of remedials specific to Uranus.
Wow.
Specific to Uranus. And this is very different from the lecture I gave at Norwalk, which a lot of people have heard. It's going to augment that, and it will bring in what to do about it. And it's not just medically oriented. That lecture was. And all Uranus affects everything in life, mentally, physical, circumstances, definitely. So how do remedials work? Many different ways. You can block something. You can absorb something, absorb it, put it over here. You can neutralize it with an opposite vibration. You can attunes that you're working with the vibration, which isn't always a good idea with Uranus, unless you like chaos. Sometimes it works really good for some things, escaping prison. I looked at some interesting cases, escaping the Anyway, so there's, let's see, so neutralizing. You also have spiritual protection, giving you something that transfers, extra protection. There's building an umbrella, so something just can't hit you in the first place. So these are all different methods, which are how talismans and amulets work. And gems adjust things through light. You can use thoughts, you can use mirrors, you can use all kinds of things. Many, many, many different systems to remediate a situation. So I've thought of quite a collection just for Uranus.
Awesome. So when we talk about remediation, Judith, we're all born with our natal chart, and our natal chart is what it is, and that's kind of our fixed framework or our petri dish within which we live and breathe and have a being, right? And so how much wiggle room does learning remediation give to people to augment what is essentially their destiny?
This is wonderful questions. This is a question that varies per person. Some people have a tremendous amount of wiggle room in life, and their lives are like tumbleweeds. They're not born to do any particularly one thing. They're just very, very, very mutable. And so their destiny depends a lot on choices and their thoughts. Some people have very, very fixed karma. I mean, so much you can predict the day their dog will throw up. I've done this. These super fixed people, very predictable. They are going to be born with, a club foot. They are going to be born with things they can't get out of. Now, even within that, there are, modern medicine can do a great deal. These people have very fixed lives, but still, you never know how there's always something called grace, there's intervention. Uranus works good this way. It can bring a surprise release from karma. All of a sudden, it's just over for some odd reason. Then most people are in the middle. Most people are in the middle. So our destiny, well, we all have seeds in us. You said the petri dish. We're born with all these imprints in us and urges. Now, if you believe in past lives, this makes a lot of sense. If you don't believe in past lives, then you're just born that way. You're a little fractal of the arrangement of vibrations at the time you were born. So you're born with various urges, desires, tendencies. You still are the farmer. This is your garden. So you still have a tremendous power over what parts of you will prune, what parts of you will weed, what parts of you we will grow roses. And Michael, this is one thing almost completely missing from modern Western astrology, because we aren't supposed to be judgmental and intolerant, which is translated as have no care for the personality development or the character development, because all character is wonderful. That is the approach. But this wasn't the approach of the Alan Leo era. And it certainly is not the approach of the Jyotish of India, where what you're developing in yourself, what kind of person you are, what kind of character, intellect, and heart you're developing, what are your actions in life, these do matter. And so we have two kinds of astrology, one where nothing matters, you're just wonderful the way you are. That is a type of reading that seems very popular today. And the other, nothing's wrong. It's okay. Then there's the one, okay, you want to become better. And I was trained in that. So, when I'm given a 3-year-old's chart, I'll tell the parent, oh, this child will have a tendency to have a very bad temper and, might need a little more discipline early, set some boundaries. This has a wonderful musical gift, but will tend to float around, needs direction. And maybe they should study something that helps them with, learning like karate or something, a lot of personal discipline, or Tai Chi. And, or this one has a health difficulty. Maybe, doing certain exercises will help early. There's a lot, we're all busy helping each other in life. And they say that the angels help us. Sometimes animals help us, plants help us. Everything is fixing everything that's broken. And so astrology is a wonderful tool for helping identify a deficiency, excess, or weakness in the body, mind, or character. But you have to have spiritual gravitas to do this, of course. And so maybe it's best that people don't do this anymore. Who knows? But these are the different approaches. If you go to an astrologer in Tibet or some in India, they will be, nothing's nice. No. They'll just tell you like it is, and what you ought to do about it, or very, very different. Highly judgmental, highly intolerant.
I find that very interesting because yes, when I study Jyotish, it's a very black and white sort of system in a lot of ways, and there are things that are definitively good and things that are definitively bad from a Jyotish perspective. And I wonder, because I think today in the West, particularly within modern Western astrology, so many people are enamored by the spiritual side of Jyotish, and they're enamored by the nodes and the and the mythology surrounding the nodes in Jyotish. And they just love all sorts of parts that we find in Jyotish, except for the black and white, good and evil part.
Mhm.
And so why do you think Jyotish is so popular in theory in terms of people? They like it in principle. They like the spirituality, they like the nodes, they like the remediation. But why do you think this other part of being able to call a spade that we find so strong in Jyotish, why do you think that that's something that in the West, in our own astrology, we find so difficult to grasp or to even do?
This is a very delicate question, and I think it has to do with our culture from maybe 1960 or 70, where there began, the Dr. Spock, what was his name? Not Dr. Spock. What was his name? The new types of education where the West became much more interested in uh, loving the human being, concern for the human being, development of the full human being, development of all human beings, so that we didn't have the barriers that many, many people had. And part of this was uh, you shouldn't even have grades. You don't make anybody uncomfortable, or nobody's wrong, nobody's better. So in India, very hierarchical system. We still have a caste system there, but they have better, they have worse, they have bad, they have good. So we see these two extremes of thinking. And to me, the best view would be to be somewhere in the middle here. Like if a baby is just tantruming all over and being a huge problem, in the West now we just let this happen, and you don't have any discipline. In the East, I mean, I've watched. I was watching some parents at the airport, and every time, from some people from Japan, every time the baby would scream, they gently put the hand over the mouth. They were like teaching the baby not to do this. Well, in the West, we consider this repressive. Is it repressive? This is something that we need to think about. So when I want to find out a truth about something, or the effect of any line of training, I look at the result down the line. So what is the result of a population that goes one route or another with a type of thinking? I'm very interested in group thought sets. So we have a very different group thought set in the West, and it's not considered appropriate to condemn, judge, ridicule, anything like that. Of course not. But it's also not considered appropriate to pass any kind of judgment. Like if you were to see a person lying in the street, you're not even supposed to think that's not good for him. You're supposed to relax all judgment. And and the fact is, human beings can't relax all judgment. It's impossible. So we're actually in this state where astrologers are becoming paralyzed, because if they see something in a chart that does look over the top, they can't say so. And because, oh my goodness, I'll be judging.
Cancelled. Hmm.
Yeah. So it's a very, very delicate issue, which is why it's sometimes easier to work with the charts of infants, because they aren't there to get upset if you say something. Only the parent will hear it. But yeah, I used to love giving natal chart readings because it was such a good character guide. And I've had so many people call me back over the years and say, you really saved me when I was a teenager and in the juvenile delinquency home. I had one kid. He was in a home for bad behavior. And I said, you look like you'd be a brilliant cartoonist. And he called me 10 years later. He said he went to great lengths to figure out where I was, to thank me, because he took that, and now he was a very good cartoonist supporting his whole family. And so this is how astrology can help.
Now, to that note, Judith, and your talk on July 6th is going to be about remediating transits of Uranus. I want to ask you, and I asked you that question because I wanted to find out from you, do you feel that transits of Uranus are objectively good, or do you feel as if in general they tend to manifest in more of a challenging way?
Oh my. It depends on the case. Physically, if we're talking medically, physically, they tend to be very problematic. And we'll discuss that later, but they tend to almost always throw something out of balance or into extreme suddenly, the sudden part. You always feel it creeping up with Saturn and Neptune and Pluto and Mars, but Uranus gets you out of left field. You're la-di-dee, la-di-da, splat. You know, tripping down the tulips, whoops, fall into a hole. However, Uranus's influence on the life can sometimes be a situation like in The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy is picked up but you're put down somewhere better suddenly. It will shake something up, never comfortable. It can suddenly close, suddenly open a whole new chapter, suddenly discover a whole talent you didn't have. It wakes you up. It wakes you up. However, it can wake you up too much. It can make you go manic. Uranus has a very strong effect on the mind. But the problem with Uranus is it doesn't operate all the time. It'll sit there all year and you're feeling nothing and then suddenly strike, boom, usually at a very close orb. But Uranus brings a lot of tension that wants a sudden resolve. So I'd say when you're under Uranus, you need to be very careful to delay judgment, because people frequently make a quick, very bad judgment. I've seen many people abandon their families. Just suddenly Uranus hits, we'll go into which aspect does that. So there's such a tremendous desire to do whatever you want now, sudden freedom, that you can cause a lot of trouble for a lot of people or yourself. So that's why they used to always warn when you're get these violent infatuations, people, they fall in love, some enchanted evening. Hear her laughing, know that across the room. Anyway, so you hear this and you're struck with love. That used to happen to me all the time. And it never goes right whether you're the last 2 weeks or the last 3 months, always just sudden, just nope. So you have to be careful with Uranus. You have to know how to, that's why astrology is brilliant. You have to see when it's doing something, but I feel everyone needs to develop the presence of mind to control their urges. Edgar Cayce, the great psychic, medical psychic, astrological psychic, he said, when asked if it was good to study astrology, and I'm pertaining this to Uranus right now, but if it was good to study astrology, his answer was, it is very, very, very good to study astrology, but rightly in the feeling that we must control our planets with our minds, that they should not control us. Now, I'm not so silly to think that sometimes they don't. There are things that happen we have little control over. The planets will show that. But we do have the authority over, most of us do, over our TV screen. We can choose to fall into a deep depression, or I'm going to not let this happen, go out on a walk, find an interesting subject. Sometimes depressions are overwhelming, though. Nothing works. So it's all a matter of degree and individual case. Now, Uranus can be very, very overstimulating to a particular hormone. Get people suddenly falling in love, like Cupid's dart with some person they've no business falling in love with. or can suddenly reverse something in their mind that totally freaks them out. And we have to know how to help people through these periods and how long it will be, and just don't do anything. or yeah, go with it. Go do something Uranian right now. You do have to develop some judgment in astrology, some guidance. They're looking to you for a guide. The astrologer has the ability to get up on a little stool and see just a little farther down the road than a person, and also tell them how far they are from shore if they're lost, and what they can do to get back to shore. So this is this, to be a good astrologer, you do need to develop some degree of spiritual wisdom.
All right. So, Judith, this is fascinating. Everything you're saying about Uranus, and also the insights you're giving regarding just how to hold astrological space for our clients in general. One of the questions that came in, and I do want to let people know that if you're watching live, please do feel free to ask questions. You could send those questions in the chat box, and then Joe is going to send me those questions. And so please do let us know if you have questions for Judith. But one of the questions that came in, Judith, was when we talk about transits of Uranus, because that's essentially what your talk is going to be about on July 6th, are we primarily talking about transits that Uranus is making to, say, for example, a planet? Or are we talking about transits that Uranus might be making through an entire house? What are you actually referring to when you're talking about transits of Uranus?
We will discuss it all. I will specifically talk about Uranus's aspects to planets, nodes, and to the angles. I will specifically be emphasizing conjunctions, which are really probably the strongest aspect I've seen. We will talk about quincunxes, squares, trines, a little sextiles, not the minor aspects. No time. And I'll probably have time to do a little bit through the houses, though Uranus will sit in a house forever. And it's not going to influence you every single day. People have to realize outer planets behave differently than the quicker moving planets.
Okay. Now, to that note, Judith, I know that you use whole sign houses, and I know that that's something that you subscribe to. Within the context of that, where you're taking the entire sign as the house, how do we then talk about the transit of Uranus through that house? Do we mean for the entire time that Uranus is going to be passing through the 30 degrees of that sign, or what does that work? How does that work within the whole sign context?
Okay, and I know there'll be a lot of Regiomontis people here, and they can continue to use Regiomontis. That is fine with the 5-degree orb going in. That's fine. If you're Placidus, fine. I was Placidian for 20 years. In the whole sign house, as soon as Uranus gets in a sign, it's now going to affect that house, which is taken, you count from the ascendant as one going counterclockwise. Now, what I tell people is you can use Regiomontis. It's a wonderful system, and it's your system that you teach, and you stick with these old methods. And that's, well, a whole sign house is also old. We all stick with the old methods. I didn't mean to make that sound funny. I love old methods. I'm totally into old methods. They're like my thing. I study them all the time. But all you need to do, and Michael does talk about this difference a little, and they knew it too, is when a planet is in the 5th house, but it's 6 signs from the ascendant, it will have some health influence. It will be still an aversion to the ascendant. You can have a planet in the 7th, 8th, 9th house in Regiomontis. But just remember, if it is 8 signs from the ascendant, it will have more of a baleful, the ascendant can't access it. So for health purposes, for medical purposes, you want to always know that difference. A planet 9 signs from the ascendant is very different from 8 signs from the ascendant, but it can still be in a Regiomontis 7th or 9th house for every other purpose. And the same with the 12th. So that's how I tell, I teach, I just like the whole sign method now. My students at the Academy for Astrological Medicine, they study in all houses, all kinds of houses. I'm sure we have Regiomantis people there. I just have to remember that rule, the aversion rule.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so a question that just came in that Joe just sent me was somebody wanted to know about transits to the natal Uranus. So how does that work, especially with planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto that we don't really own in a personal way in our natal chart? What happens when we have transits to our natal Uranus, not just from Uranus as a planet, but I mean in general, what happens when our natal Uranus is transited by any planet, essentially?
Well, when natal Uranus is transited by any planet, it's woken up. It's going to, especially, you'll notice it more when certain planets come over it. Mars and Mercury like to set it off. And we'll talk about this more. But if anybody heard my Norwalk lecture, the electrical trio, Mars, Mercury, Uranus, they all excite extra electrical sparks. Uranus seems to provoke electricity. So you'll really feel those conjunctions. You might feel them by exact squares within 1 degree. Even a trine from Mars to Uranus I've seen that happen in electrocution cases within 1 degree. So whatever your Uranus means for you is stimulated. If the sun is crossing it today, most of you are too young for that, but if the sun is crossing it, that will be the time you'll come up with a new idea, or you'll get a little fractious, or you'll want to suddenly abandon your career and go wandering, whatever it is. Again, make sure it's a logical decision that doesn't upset your good life path. So whatever your Uranus means for you, and your natal Uranus often indicates a place of genius, place you have a special genius, something only you can do the way you do it. Everybody's unique. If you can help a person find their special genius, many people, it lies latent, like a sleeping volcano. Wakes up when they're 50, like Julia Child. She starts her cooking career. So study the sign and house of your natal Uranus, any planet it's conjunct. And this can be a very special talent or gift that's lying latent, and it can get provoked. However, if it represents for you a hormonal imbalance, it gets worse on that day. Uranus has a lot to do with the thyroid, by the way. Edgar Cayce said it ruled that gland. He varies from the other older astrologers who didn't know about Uranus. So I hope that helps that questioner.
Awesome, awesome. Judith, another question coming in from our resident ER doctor, Karen.
Oh.
She, she's she's asking, how did you organize information when you were doing medical astrology research? And specifically, did you follow up with your clients regularly to see how the transits were playing out with them?
This is an interesting question. Since I began doing readings when I was 14, I was obsessed with watching how things worked out physically and how people looked, how their chart influenced their physical appearance. I spent, probably 6 years studying astrological genetic cases. So I got a pretty good feel. And every time a client comes in, they want vocation, they want family. I notice what's going on physically, ask them questions. That's how I learned. In organizing research, now I only have one major project I did on that, where I gathered, it was a physical astrogenetic project. And I studied how to do research for a very long time. So, you get the hypothesis, you have it notarized, you get 100 sample of 100 charts, and they have to be the same thing. So, if it's diabetes, it's a specific type of diabetes. Maybe separate by gender if you can. That's getting more tough to do because now we have different genders, more genders available. Always had, but so anyway, you don't just throw everything together in your research. We have huge research samples of different diseases at my academy in the research forum now. I think it's the world's first medical research forum. We have this guy, a PO, and he just keeps putting his collections on. They're fantastic. So you then see if your hypothesis works, and if it works, you start over and you replicate it. Then you get someone else to replicate it. I went all through that with my study. So some people do, some cases, I've had doctors call me and they say, cannot figure out this case. I'd like your input. So, okay, work with the doctor, do the chart up, do the reading, and I'll get feedback. Sometimes the feedback is the astrology solved the case that 5 doctors could not. This has happened multiple times. And so I watch death charts. Anytime I see a death, I look up the chart, reason for death, do the aspects in the transit. So we're talking decades of doing this. So I've got a pretty good feel, if that answers the question.
Awesome. All right. So next question, Judith, that someone is asking is, and you can let me know how you feel about this. Someone is asking about thoughts on Uranus transiting the 12th house in general. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I could give one thought. The 12th house has a lot to do with your mental health. So the whole chart does, of course, but specific issues that are causing trouble, just like the 6th house has a lot to do with physical health, even though the whole chart is health. So it's often something that you're having to work out psychologically in your life. It also governs sleep. Uranus has a big effect on discovery. It reveals things, it wakes things up. So you have to ask, what is being woken up? By looking at that person's chart. It's always individual. If this person had a tendency, say, for schizoaffective disorder, Uranus in the 12th would not make this easier because it'd be opening the veil even wider, to the astral world. If a person had a really hard time sleeping, if that was their natal tendency, maybe they had Mars back there, this is not going to make it easier. However, if they had been stuck all their life and maybe had been a wonderful musician but never able to do anything with it, or a wonderful poet, or had an urge for spiritual life, this wakes up. Not all at once, in spurts. It could lie there dormant for months in the 12th house. It takes like 6 months just to complete a cycle over 1 degree. Seriously. So every now and then there'll be a spurt of, maybe if you believe in past lives, suddenly a memory comes up. You just have to go be a monk again. This strikes people. One thing that you learn as an astrologer, a real working astrologer, where you see clients every day for years, you learn a lot about people. And you see this, I must go off, and it's like they have to go do something right now that's been hiding latent. So it'll wake up the latent. If you have secret enemies, it could wake those up. It could bring sudden end. If you have Jupiter in Pisces in the 12th house and your angels have always protected you mysteriously, it could bring a sudden spiritual opening. So you always have to say, when these cookbook approaches, Michael, I'm sure you know this too. If somebody says, well, what is this going to mean in this house? What does that house mean to you? What is that? What is it shown for your life this time? Then that is what Uranus is going to wake up in spurts.
How difficult do you find it to be in terms of writing a decent astrology book? Because I know you just referenced the cookbook approach, which is such a big approach in astrology today. But as you and I both know, reading a chart is such a nuanced thing, and no two charts are the same, and no two cases are going to be exactly the same. How does that factor in when you find yourself sitting down and writing an actual book, when you know that somebody reading this might have moon in Taurus, for example, but their moon in Taurus is going to be very different from somebody else's moon in Taurus? How do we then consolidate all of that complexity and still be able to write an astrology book that's of any use at all to anyone?
This is another brilliant question, Michael. I love him because to me it's like playing ping pong. It's fun. I've never been asked this. It's very difficult. Yes. Anytime you say, and I've had to write a lot of books, 14 books now. So, this is going to mean this. This is going to mean this. You try to also teach the principle behind it. Like I say, Uranus is cold yet stimulating and spasmodic. This is its energy. It can work out in all manner of ways related to that planet and that house. But this is a general template for you to follow. Okay, follow. And then I like to sprinkle in little personal examples. I don't always, but little, to make it a little more interesting. In my Medical Astrology in Action, that has the huge breakdown on Uranus Transits. So if anybody wants to get ready for that class, that's the book, Medical Astrology in Action. And I have 82 field notes in there. I call them field notes of really remarkable cases. But the thing that folks really need to learn, and this is not the question you asked, is how to separate the influence of Uranus or Saturn or any planet from every other planet. And my biggest complaint today, I think Michael knows my rant on this, is that people come into my office all the time. I had 2 just this week writing things in, and they'll say, my husband left me. I lost my job. My car broke down and my dog died. All because Chiron is sitting at the midpoint of my moon and my sun. It's always Chiron. Chiron has now taken, which is a tiny ice comet that we have no true research on, except from the Magi Society, is now considered more powerful than every other thing, more than eclipses, more than Saturn, more than Uranus, more than Mars. And why? I can't figure this out. And so I'll look at the chart, and there's Saturn is now transiting their south node. Their south node is transiting their sun. Uranus is sitting on their ascendant, and Mars is just quincunx their ascendant, and their progress moon is on their south node too, and on. And they're blaming everything on Chiron. And this happens. Why is this happening? How did Chiron get so important? And why? There's no research to at all, support this at all. But they're missing everything else in the chart. So apparently Chiron is now the planet that takes the place of Uranus, Pluto, eclipses, nodes, and Saturn. Anything goes wrong. Oh, and Mars too. But my question is, I'm fine if it's true, but why? And I look at the chart, and all these other really huge, gigantic things are going on that client does not see. And they're all astrologers, or studying astrologers. So can you help me with this, Michael?
Well, okay. So for a very long time, I was anti-Chiron, and I've said that multiple times on the show. I was very Chiron averse. And truthfully, today we have a whopping body of research at Oraculos regarding Chiron from a natal perspective. I have literally zero to say about Chiron from a transit perspective because that hasn't been my focus. But I have a mammoth amount of things to say about Chiron natally. For example, and I know people have heard me say this over and over again, but the Chiron came into my life because of a client came once and had an awful maternal story, and nothing else in the chart supported that maternal story in any obvious way. And I don't even know what happened. I think somehow Chiron was randomly on the screen because I was giving a workshop someplace and somebody asked me, hey, what does that key shape look like? So I went on the glyphs and I added the Chiron glyph to the chart. And when I gave this person the reading, Chiron was on the screen as well. And the person had an exact square of Moon and Chiron. And that was the beginning of something. And what I found within my own astrological studies is that when you ask the universe to show you something, it sends you client after client after client with that exact same thing. So all of these clients started coming into my doors in droves, basically, with Moon square Chiron, Moon quincunx Chiron, Moon parallel Chiron, Moon semi-square Chiron, Moon opposite Chiron, and they all had the same story. My mother hated me. My mother didn't want me. My mother wanted a boy, but she had a girl. She wanted a dog, but she had a child. My mother said she was going to commit suicide. My mother did commit suicide. My mother tied me to the furnace, and she told me years later she didn't do it. My mother was on horse tranquilizers. Moon in hard aspect to Chiron, unfailingly, 9 times out of 10, if I see someone with Moon in hard aspect to Chiron, I know that they have a harrowing maternal story. And the 1 time out of 10 when that isn't the truth, they have awful digestive issues. So those are the two ways that the Moon Chiron has manifested. And I've also done research on Venus Chiron and Mercury Chiron. So I have things to say about Moon Chiron, I have things to say about Venus Chiron, I have things to say about Mercury Chiron, but I don't have things to say about other planets in combination with Chiron because I don't believe in making stuff up. And I feel as if I will know what I need to know about Saturn Chiron, for example, when the time is right, if the time is right, because who knows? Maybe within my lifetime, all I will ever know is things about Moon Chiron, Venus Chiron, Mercury Chiron. And I'm fine with that because I never wanted to use Chiron in the first place. But the point is that from a natal perspective, I've begrudgingly taken on this Chiron mantle because it is of extraordinary importance, particularly in terms of the maternal thing. From a transiting perspective, I have nothing to say about Chiron transit, Chiron progression, Chiron solar arc, nothing, because I haven't looked into that. So I'm not going to pretend as if I know what that means. But that's me. I also don't know what other people do in the astrological community. I don't really pay attention to people, so I didn't know that people were blaming everything on their Chiron situation, but I do find that interesting.
Yeah, Chiron seems to have taken precedence over every other planet, including Jupiter. This is what's puzzling me. Not that it may not have an effect, but I've found that your Moon Chiron. I tried it on my first case and it worked very well. So and if more people find that, then we know it's because sometimes one person just attracts their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute you told me that, I found the first case and it was a harrowing maternal experience, but the person also had Moon in the 8th house
Mm-hmm.
exactly squaring Saturn. And so it can also be explained by something else. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I do my research. I always say, well, can this be explained by something else? Is this making it worse? But I have to say that that rule did work
Mm-hmm.
out. And this is how research should be done. And we've drifted very far from shore on this.
And the other point to your point about why do people, get caught up on single factors, I think that that's a problem with astrology in general. We tend to speak in terms of single factors. We don't speak in a complex aspect-based way. So people aren't talking about the fact that their moon is being squared by this and their moon is in the quincunx with that and this is doing that because we've lost this nuance of how to speak an aspect-based language. So people do want to talk about my Pluto is in Aquarius, help. People do want to talk about my Chiron is doing this thing, help, because it's far easier to speak about single factors in astrology than it is to speak about complex aspect relationships between multiple stellar influences.
I think that's totally true. And of course, to a student, they may not be able to speak in complex factors yet. So they are learning one step at a time.
How do we fix that?
How do we fix that? Uh-huh. Uh, well, I think what you and I both do, Michael, is stand up for the highest possible education and standards in this field. And also people need to become more patient. People think fast food now. everything is quick, everything is fast. Well, you cannot become an astrologer overnight. It's a process. You might have to study several years before you feel ready to give a reading. Then it's going to take several years to really start. It's like you learn the star knowledge, it comes into you. You need patience. Patience is in short supply. It's a virtue. So yes, insisting for oneself as a young student on, I'm going to be a real astrologer. I'm going to get an education. Oraculos is wonderful. I mean, I mean it when I say you're here to save astrology. Brilliant education you're giving, really, truly. And I mean that. And I'm hoping to do the same in the medical area, medical astrology, give the highest possible education in 6 fields of medical and 6 subgenres. And people need to be patient with themselves and not go, oh my God, I'll never know how to do it. I'll never be as good as him. Well, everybody had to learn a guitar slowly, or anybody even learning to be a cook or a parent. We all took a little time with our fields. So just because you can make money at astrology doesn't mean you should decide that, you're all ready in 1 year. I mean, people can give good basic readings, but you're going to be getting better and better and better. And you won't become a master astrologer for 10 or 20 years. Some people are just born astrologers. They just take to it like a duck to water. It's amazing.
Judith, so we've been talking for a while. I'm super happy to have been able to speak with you today, just because I think it's so important, the perspective that you have and that you bring to astrology based on your decades of practice, but also just based on your orientation. Because you could have practiced astrology for over 50 years and had a completely different orientation, and you could have been a completely different quality of astrologer. And I think that your orientation towards practicing astrology in a concrete way that can be demonstrated, that can be proven, I think that that is something that is in short supply in our community, because we don't really have that. I personally, and I've said this before, I think that a lot of astrology tends to be this, and I don't want to say the word, but I think a lot of astrology tends to be astrologers astrologizing for each other. And when that happens, we sometimes miss out on the larger practicality of we're actually here to serve people. And we're not just here to talk to each other and give each other pats on the backs at conferences. We're actually here to serve people who know nothing about what we do, and they need to be able to understand it. And we need to be able to demonstrate it to them without filling their minds with all sorts of useless jargon that has no actual relationship to the concrete realities they're facing in their lives. And what I love about you, Judith, is that you really have the ability to hold a very high caliber of astrology within yourself, but still bring it down to earth in such a way where people can actually use it and people can apply it to their lives to help them troubleshoot some of these major areas of challenge and difficulties that they face. So I want to commend you on that, because you have done an extraordinary service to this field just in terms of holding the caliber of astrology that you hold within yourself. And I'm so happy to be able to host you at Oraculos and have you share with our community and share with everybody who signs up for this workshop, essentially, your wealth of wisdom on this particular topic. Because I know, and I think even in talking to you today, it's obvious that we could start talking about one topic, but then it mushrooms and it becomes so many other things. So I know that we're going to be talking about remediating Uranus, but I am so sure that people are going to get so much more from that just based on who you are. So thank you so much for being here, Judith, and thank you for being you.
Oh, thank you, Michael, for having me. This was one of the best set of questions I've gotten to answer. It was great.
Awesome, awesome. Everybody, if you want to sign up for Judith's workshop, it is going to be on the 6th of July, right here at the Oraculos School of Astrology. And we're going to put all the information down below in the description box for you to sign up for that workshop today. And also, please do make sure to go over and check out Judith's website. Judith, please give us your two websites, your personal website as well as the website for the Academy.
Yes, my personal website is judithhillastrology.com, and there is a button to the Academy on there, and all my books, judithhillastrology.com, and my school is Academy for Astrological Medicine.com. And so it's Academy for, not two, Academy for Astrological Medicine.com. And it's called Astrological Medicine because that was the original word for medical astrology, which was astrologophysic in the Renaissance. Michael will like that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for letting me tell them, Michael.
You're so welcome. So everybody, please do go and check out both of Judith's websites, and please also buy Judith's books. Judith, I think when I was publishing my first book, you and I spoke about self-publishing, and I think that you have been a titan within the field of astrological book publishing because you've been self-publishing for a long time, even before people even realized that was something that you could successfully do. So please do go and support Judith's 14 books now. What's the most recent book, Judith?
The 12 zodiac sign syndromes of medical astrology.
I've been hearing amazing things about that book, Judith, and you sold out at Norwalk, yes?
We sold out at Norwalk very much. Yeah, people love that new book. I apologize for the editing. It will be re-edited. There's some typos in there. I don't have Michael's editors, but it was a very popular book. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to put all of the information down below in the description box so that you all can go and check out Judith's latest book, as well as her website, as well as her courses, and definitely her upcoming course on remediating Uranus, which is going to be this July 6th, 2024. Once again, everybody, thank you so much for making it the Oraculos Podcast. I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, leaving you in peace and love and hope. Until we meet again. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, Michael.